Hello, I'm Louisa Pilbeam. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, OPEC Plus pumps more oil, while Donald Trump's tariffs target Russian crude buyers. Trump's next move on Moscow's supplies could shake up the energy map. How will that affect the market as the IEA warns of oversupply? They're seen as China's most powerful trade weapon. Beijing dominates the global supply of rare earth elements that power the economies of the future. The US and Europe aim to break that grip, but can they? From oil to rare earths, there is a softer power that's on the rise. Chinese Labubu toys are taking the world by storm, with people lining up for hours to buy them. So what's behind the craze for the plush dolls? Pump more oil to regain market share or risk a glut that could drive prices down? OPEC Plus, which includes Saudi Arabia and Russia, appears to have opted for the second option. 8 members of the alliance of major oil exporters have agreed to another large production hike in September. That's despite a warning by the International Energy Agency that the global market faces a record oversupply next year. But the risks and uncertainty don't end there. US President Donald Trump's tariffs have targeted Russian crude buyers. But whether they are imposed very much depends on the outcome of trade negotiations with India and China, and even more so on talks over a peace deal in Ukraine between Washington and Moscow that may result in an easing or tightening of US sanctions on Russia. Victoria Gatenby reports.
OPEC Plus has agreed to a significant output hike, raising production by more than 500,000 barrels of oil a day in September, almost matching August's increase. It's a faster than expected rollback of previous voluntary output cuts, restoring supply months earlier than originally planned.
When they started this process, I think there were a few different motives, punishing the non-compliant members, putting pressure on US shale. But I think those have more or less kind of fallen away now. And now we're left with really the key overriding objective is that of regaining market share.
The International Energy Agency warns that a sustained rise in output could push the market into oversupply, driving down prices and cutting into revenues for oil exporting countries. These decisions on production come against a backdrop of increasing geopolitical tensions and shifting global alliances. US President Donald Trump signed an executive order raising tariffs on India to 50%, citing its purchase of oil from Russia. It's part of an effort to limit Moscow's energy revenues.
American dollars buy Indian products, and that sets in motion where those dollars finance a war, which then requires American taxpayers to pay for defending against the Russian armaments. So that kind of trade doesn't work.
India, one of Russia's biggest oil customers, says the tariffs are unfair and such imports are essential for its energy security.
We are an energy-hungry country. We are a fast-growing economy, and we need more oil. Today we consume 5.5 million barrels of oil. In coming years, we are going to consume 7 million barrels of oil. And nobody can say, why only from us?
US measures targeting Russian oil are likely to have ripple effects far beyond India's borders. Some analysts warn that tighter restrictions could squeeze supply, especially if demand from fast-growing economies stays strong. Others say closer US-Russia engagement could open the door to more Russian oil on the market. OPEC Plus, which pumps around half the world's oil, will meet again next month to review its targets. But with global politics, economic uncertainty and shifting alliances in play, the group faces one of its most delicate balancing acts in years. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera, for Counting the Cost.
Prices for Brent crude, the international benchmark, hovered around $70 a barrel immediately after the OPEC Plus decision. They've since dropped to nearly $65. In April, they've dipped below $60 per barrel for the first time in 4 years. That's after the oil group decided to accelerate output hikes and Trump announced global reciprocal tariffs. Should OPEC Plus opt to pump even more oil, some experts say prices could drop below $50. They predict weakening demand growth. That is well below what some oil-producing nations need to balance their budget. The International Monetary Fund estimates the Saudis need prices above $90 to cover their economic plans. Well, Gaurav Sharma is an independent UK-based energy market analyst who provides insights and reports on his blog, The Oilholics Anonymous. And he joins us now from London. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme, Gaurav. OPEC Plus then say this price increase is happening in view of a steady global outlook and healthy markets. But the IEA has now released that warning that oil markets are on track for a record surplus next year. So how much of a risk is this hike in output?
Well, it's good to be back in the program. It's nice to hear from you. What we have here is a classic paradox for OPEC Plus, but let's treat the IEA's take first. Now, what we have is a situation in a world where demand is uncertain, let's say, even if not falling. There's a whole lot of oil out there. Now, at the bullish end, you have OPEC demand growth forecast. At the bearish end, you'll have IEA demand growth forecast. Let's say we take an aggregate somewhere in the modest middle, that in 2025, the world will consume north, or demand growth will be somewhere north of 1 million barrels per day. Now, that sort of demand growth for this year, and perhaps projected for next year, can be serviced by non-OPEC crude alone. It's not just the United States. It's Canada, it's Brazil, it's Guyana, it's Norway. All of them are pumping at a canter. Now, throw into the mix the OPEC Plus lot. And what you have here is that two protagonists pumping a lot more oil. So I think I concur with the IEA. We are likely to see a surplus come the end of this year.
OK, so why haven't markets crashed now as they did in April?
I suspect much of that has to do with the quote-unquote OPEC cheating by some of the producers there who claimed that they were cutting, but in fact maintained their levels. So when OPEC first declared its stance that it's going to start upping its output, the initial response was one of bearishness. But then what happened was that it was not reflected in the data, in the market data. And the market sort of priced in that OPEC, some of these OPEC barrels that they're saying they're going to put on the market are sort of already there. Now what has happened is in the last few months, it has become manifestly apparent that OPEC Plus wants more market share, regardless of where the price goes. Hence, we see that no matter what is thrown, in terms of pricing sentiment, the oil price geopolitically, the tragedy between Israel and Gaza, Ukraine, whatever has come geopolitically, the price just still cannot even touch $70. So I think I don't see there's a whole lot of positivity for the oil price come the end of the year.
OK, now it's useful to point out that the US is not part of OPEC Plus. And we're having this conversation before a scheduled meeting between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. So among other priorities, obviously Ukraine, they could agree a deal on oil. How could that reshape the global oil market?
Again, I think this meeting between both heads of states, as various commentators on Al Jazeera have alluded to, is a meet and greet and a field meeting. We're in the realm of hypotheticals. So let's say that there is some kind of the element of surprise, a positive surprise, that there'll be an end of hostilities in Ukraine. Now, that again is positive for Russia because it can legally, unsanctioned, put some more barrels on the market. And if more barrels come in, then again, on top of what Russia is doing as part of OPEC Plus and non-OPEC production, again, it will add to the crude supply pool at a time of uncertain demand.
OK, Saudi Arabia needs oil prices at around $90 a barrel, as we've been hearing. Why would they then agree to this production hike?
I think Riyadh is in the midst of a very nice balancing act. President Trump needs lower prices back home for political reasons, or to make it price positive for the US consumer, to put it differently. So they're trying to balance this. On the one hand, Saudi cooperation gives Mr. Trump a stronger hand to claim to the American consumer that the prices are being tempered. At the same time, the Saudis themselves have two vested interests. One is to try and sort of hurt non-OPEC production with low prices. And the second is to teach certain members within OPEC corridors a bit of a lesson, saying, look, we've been taking a lot of pain from these production cuts. Now it's time that we show you that we have surplus capacity or spare capacity.
OK, and can Donald Trump's trade tariff threats on India and China dissuade them from buying cheap Russian oil?
This is a bit tricky for both nations, but I suspect that the Chinese can handle it better. They have a more diversified supply pool. With India, there's a classic problem. Now, Russia was, if we rewind the clock back to the Ukraine conflict, Russia was a part exporter to India. It was not a huge price. But when the sanctions hit, the Indians started changing their refining complex and buying more and more Russian crude at discounted prices. So suddenly Russia becomes a major player for Indian imports. And at the same time, the Indian economy overtakes Japan to become the world's third largest consumer in that window. So the Indians have a pickle. The Chinese reserve currency is accepted by the Russians, but the Indian rupee is not. So they can't bypass the international system. They have to stay within the international system, i.e. dollar payments, whether they want to buy from Russia or everyone else. And that presents them with a huge problem. Now, to massage Mr. Trump's ego, or however you want to put it, they are taking more American crude oil. But India will be in more of a bind than China if Russia is curtailed in the recent developments.
And what about the consumer in all of this? How will it affect the consumer?
I think the way the market dynamics stands globally, it's price positive for the consumer. I anticipate low prices come the end of the year, and for much of first half of 2026. You can never discount geopolitical infractions. We live in an uncertain world. But right now, I think Brent is likely to test a floor of $60, and that would percolate through to prices at the pump.
OK, Gaurav Sharma, we appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much. Oil isn't the only resource shaping the balance of power in the world. A set of elements called rare earths are just as critical. Those materials are a crucial part of almost everything from smartphones to fighter jets. Beijing controls the vast majority of their mining and processing. Experts say China has managed to turn that dominance into a leverage in the trade war with the US. Now Washington and the EU are trying to loosen China's grip on the supply chain of rare earths. But what exactly are they, and how did they become such a powerful geopolitical weapon? Let's have a look. Rare earths are a group of 17 metallic elements with magnetic properties that are found in the Earth's crust. They are unevenly distributed and hard to extract and refine. Magnets made from rare earths power everything from electric vehicles and wind turbines to defence equipment, data centres and high-tech consumer electronics. And China controls the supply chain. Around 70% of rare earths mining and 90% of refining happens in China. That's as a result of years of support from the Chinese government. Analysts say China is using its dominance in rare earths as leverage in trade disputes. Chinese officials want the US to ease export controls on high-bandwidth memory chips used in artificial intelligence systems. These shipments were banned by former President Joe Biden last year. China restricted exports of rare earths in April in response to US tariffs, but later eased them temporarily while trade negotiations with the US continue. Since then, China's exports to the US have increased, soaring in June to nearly 7 times the level of the previous month. Emily Iona-Stewart is the head of policy for transition minerals at Global Witness, and she joins us now from Brussels. Emily, how did China get so far ahead on rare earths? Is it too late for the rest of the world to catch up now?
Hi, and thanks for having me. The story of China's dominance of rare earths really goes back as far as the 1950s, and certainly it's something that has accelerated since as early as the 1990s, when they realized that many of the technologies that underpin modern life were going to be really reliant on these minerals. And so in terms of others catching up, absolutely, it's a tall order, because we're talking about a strategy which has not only seen China invest in the mining, but the entire vertically integrated supply chain right up to the final manufactured goods. It is possible for other areas to potentially catch up in other areas, however, such as really doubling down and investing in circularity and designing some of these minerals potentially out of their own products and supply chains and looking into new ways to have diversification and their own supply chains of minerals.
Is China, though, using that dominance in rare earths as a trade weapon?
I think that's a difficult thing to say. I think we really need to consider, first of all, who fired the first shot in the trade wars, because it wasn't China who was looking for this tariff dispute. Now, of course, it has come in handy when the rubber has hit the road and they've been able to use their dominance of rare earths to have some leverage over the US to make sure that some of their own demands are met and some of those tariffs have come down. But I think that we have to look at all of this through the lens of China's own domestic ambitions, which is ultimately that they want to be able to manufacture products, end products, which they sell to the rest of the world. So the leverage is handy and certainly something that they have been known to use before. Think about Japan in the 2010s, but it's not necessarily the only aim that they have.
OK, let's have a look for a moment at what Europe and the US are doing. The EU introduced its Critical Raw Materials Act last year, and that sets targets for reducing dependence on imports of rare earths. So is Europe and is the US doing enough?
First of all, I would say that the strategy of both the US and Europe is slightly misguided because it relies a great deal on this idea that they can start to mine for their own minerals and that way break away from the supply chains of China. Now, we know that new mines of this type take years to come on board. One of the things that the Critical Raw Materials Act is potentially doing in the EU is deregulating, which we don't think is a good way to make sure that you get mines coming on board. It's not necessarily regulation that stands in the way, but in fact, quite often it's simply paperwork and the types of people that you need and the skills that you need to be able to do these things. I think that it's really incumbent on both the US and the EU to make sure that they're implementing really strong circularity measures alongside these mining ambitions, because those are really long term, but circularity measures, making sure that you're decreasing the amount of minerals that you need in the short term, are going to really get you results much quicker than mining only.
Now, developing countries, they have rich resources when it comes to rare earths, but how big an economic opportunity is it for developing countries?
Well, here I'd quite like to bring in the case of Myanmar, because I think this is really important to the whole discussion about these rare earths. It's little known that about 2/3 of the terbium and dysprosium, which are minerals which are vital for the engines of electric vehicles, are actually coming from Kachin province in Myanmar, where the mining for these rare earths has been absolutely devastating. So first of all, we should look at China's own supply chain as not necessarily being as stable as we think it is. But also, this is an example of a developing country where mining for these minerals, which are needed by the rest of the world, has not brought any tangible benefits whatsoever. Now, that said, there are other countries which are now entering the fore, such as Brazil and Vietnam, who haven't yet got established pathways where those harms have been done. And so it is interesting for them potentially to enter into starting looking at mining and exporting their own rare earth materials, but they shouldn't rush into anything just because of the narrative around rare earths and other minerals at the moment. They should be thinking very carefully about which deals they enter into and to make sure that anything that they do in terms of mining and export does bring tangible benefits to their own economies, not just to their tax coffers, but also to the local population in terms of benefits, infrastructures, jobs, and a chunk of that value chain for themselves.
OK, well, certainly an important conversation to have. So, Emily Iona Stewart, thank you.
Thanks.
During economic uncertainty, such as the trade war, big ticket spending slows and people often shift their money towards smaller, more affordable products. The phenomenon known as Treatomics is booming. So what is it exactly? Well, it is a new version of the century-long lipstick effect, which refers to the rise in cosmetic sales during economic downturn. Treatomics now covers consumers who spend on small items like makeup, perfume and candles, or even collectible rubber ducks. People seek out small purchases to boost their mood or reward themselves when life's traditional milestones are harder to achieve. The economic phenomena comes against a backdrop of inflation and high interest rates, which drive up borrowing costs and concerns over jobs. It's often seen as an indicator of how consumers feel about the wider economy. One of the most in-demand little luxuries right now isn't lipstick or a tech gadget, it's Labubu plush toys, the elf-like creatures with 9-toothed grins, which have become a global trend. They're made exclusively by Pop Mart, a Chinese company. Whether or not these toys are in fact cute is up for debate, but fans queue for hours to buy them. They sell out online within minutes, and a human-sized one has fetched more than $150,000 at auction. The world's fascination with Labubu has almost tripled Pop Mart's profits in the last year. It's raised questions, though, around consumer behaviour during economic uncertainty. Katrina Yu reports from Beijing.
This surveillance camera footage shows thieves breaking into a store in California. They're not there for cash, expensive jewelry, or high-tech electronics. They're looting thousands of dollars worth of Labubus, a Chinese plush toy which has become trendy worldwide. So trendy, people are willing to queue for hours to get their hands on one.
It's just a nice thing. It's sweet. It connects people.
The mischievous-looking monster dolls are the creation of toy maker Pop Mart. They soared in popularity after celebrities such as Rihanna were photographed with them attached to their bags. They sell for about $30 each, with limited editions costing much more. In June, a 1.3-meter-tall Labubu was auctioned in China for $150,000.
People usually think of auction houses as something very traditional, antiques, calligraphy, and paintings. And I thought, what if we could attract younger collectors? So I asked myself, what's the hottest topic right now? And it's the Labubu.
Fans say the appeal lies in the so-called blind box packaging. Shoppers don't know which one they'll get until they open it. But experts say the craze in China reflects weak consumer sentiment. A property crisis and a tight labour market has seen many hold off on buying big-ticket items like homes and furniture, opting instead for smaller, pleasurable purchases.
Clearly, people are spending more on cultural and entertainment stuff. And even for the older generation, they're spending way more than before on tourism, on watching shows. And for younger generation, surprisingly, it's the Labubu.
Pop Mart's profits have soared this year, and the toy maker is capitalizing on Labubu's popularity by opening this theme park in Beijing. But tickets need to be booked in advance. Just like the dolls, they sell out quickly. Pop Mart now also sells jewelry, with this store opening in Shanghai earlier this year.
Nowadays, young people are paying more attention to psychological needs. Can this thing make me happy? That's what we truly need to pursue right now.
A feverish pursuit of the cute and fluffy that doesn't show signs of slowing anytime soon. Katrina Yu for Counting the Cost in Beijing.
Ashley Didaranok is founder and CEO of Chozan, a digital marketing and consulting company based in China, and she joins us now from Beijing. Ashley, we've certainly been talking about this a lot in the Al Jazeera newsrooms. I have to say, how does this toy go from quirky-looking doll to worldwide craze? Is it luck or is it a well-executed marketing strategy?
I would say it's a lot of things coming together, because these toys actually appeared already on the Pop Mart roster in 2019. But at first they were little figurines, so they were vinyl figurines, not so plushy and cute as you can see them right now. Then in 2024, this happened. This little ring really revolutionized it, because now we could attach them to our bags and they became bag charms. The next thing that happened is celebrities. In Asia, we had Lisa from Blackpink attaching her to the bags and talking about loving the ugly, cute aesthetics. And all that started rolling out with international celebrities. Plus, of course, the blind box concept that we were just now talking about really pushed this trend forward, because many people went online to unbox it. So we have billions of views of people unboxing Labubus and ultimately creating their own stories with the toy. On top of all that, of course, we just came out of the pandemic, and young people are looking for ways to deal with loneliness, with their awkwardness. Social interactions are not as easy as before, and Labubu provides them this opportunity for, an easy escape.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing your Labubu there. Nice to see. How much is this then, as you mentioned there, down to the timing, the fact that we're living in globally difficult times economically, and that creates the so-called lipstick effect, known by Gen Z as Treatomics. Is this then when people treat themselves to cheaper goods to give themselves that high?
Absolutely. In fact, PopMart is a very interesting company because what they do is they curate a roster of characters. Today they have more than 90 characters, and each of the characters has their own unique social appeal. In fact, they are like anthropologists who are trying to understand what is going to trend across various customer groups and consumer groups over the next 10 years. And they create unique characters and stories and angles for these people. And when the time is right, just like with Labubu right now, it becomes not only a China phenomena where people were, again, lonely, people were economically, unstable, and they felt like they needed to buy something, they wanted a shot of dopamine, they wanted all those things, and they could find it in Labubu. But beyond China, it is also appealing globally because everybody is among the young people is going through pretty much the same thing. So yes, Treatomics works. Beyond Treatomics, we of course have the loneliness. Beyond that, we have the Peter Pan effect, where young adults do not want to grow up anymore. They want to remain young and they want to, participate in the toy market, and they want to stay connected to their inner child and rekindle that relationship. So all of these things came together in Labubu.
But the big question is this likely to continue? Are we all going to be continuing to get Labubus? And for a company, how do they sustain this?
Well, I would say PopMart surely hopes so. And they are consistently investing in this character and other characters. PopMart in general plays long game, and they have a strategy. For example, Labubu right now moves beyond just blind boxes into the, as we saw, jewelry. They also have an amusement park, a PopMart themed amusement park. There will be a movie and a TV series coming out next year in collaboration with Netflix. So ultimately, PopMart views Labubu as the next Hello Kitty, and they do have a fair chance to make it possible. Beyond just Labubu, whether or not this will continue will depend on how well is PopMart able to curate and develop their roster of characters. Beyond just Labubu, there is Crybaby, there is Molly, there's Twinkle Twinkle, and many, many others.
Okay, I might have to go out and get my Labubu then. Ashley Didaranok, thank you very much for joining us. And that is our show for this week. Do get in touch with us on X. I'm at Louise Pilbeam TV, and use the hashtag AJCTC when you do that. Or drop us an email. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our address. There's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC, and that will take you straight to our page, which has individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. That is it for our edition of Counting the Costs. I'm Louisa Pilbeam. From the whole team, thank you for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is up next.